A little girl in the crowd made a strange sign with her hand. Nobody understood it, except for the royal guard. A few seconds later, he broke away from the marching line, stopped the whole parade, and what happened next left everyone completely shocked and silent. Now, before we go on, please tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to the channel if you respect the royal guards. The morning sun was shining brightly on Buckingham Palace. Crowds of tourists had gathered to watch the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Children sat high up on their parents' shoulders, while tour guides explained how important the tradition was. This ceremony started over 500 years ago. One guide told her group, "These soldiers aren't just for show. They are real soldiers who have fought in wars." Guard Sergeant Theo Marwood stood perfectly still, at attention. The morning light shone off the polished brass buttons on his uniform. He had been in the Royal Regiment for 8 years and had learned to stand completely still while being aware of everything around him. This was a skill he'd learned in battle, but it was just as useful during these ceremonies. As the band started playing and the soldiers began to march, Sergeant Marwood kept his eyes looking straight ahead. But he noticed everything: the quiet talking of the crowd, the feeling of the summer breeze, and the sound of boots hitting the stone ground. These were all normal parts of his job. He had no idea that today's parade would test not just his discipline, but his kindness in a way no war ever had. Among all the excited faces, 7-year-old Lily Davis stood unusually still. Her hand was held tightly in her stepfather's grip. Unlike the other children who were bouncing around, Lily stood stiffly. Her eyes nervously darted between the marching guards and her stepfather. "Stand up straight," Sam Davis muttered, pulling at her arm hard. "And remember what I told you." Lily nodded quickly, wincing as his fingers squeezed her shoulder. Even though it was a warm June morning, she was wearing a long-sleeved blue dress that covered her arms completely. It looked a bit strange, and some people had glanced curiously at her. When Sam checked his phone for a moment, his grip loosened slightly. Lily's sleeve slipped up, showing faint yellow bruises around her wrist. She quickly pulled the sleeve back down, her eyes wide with a fear she knew well. "Can I take a picture of the guards, Dad?" she whispered. "Stop asking questions," Sam replied. His voice sounded polite, but his eyes were cold. "And don't call me that when we're out. It's Sam, remember?" As the guards marched closer, Lily stared at their smart red uniforms, amazed. For a short moment, her childlike wonder took over her fear. Sergeant Marwood noticed her straight away, not because she was loud, but because she was so still in the middle of the excited crowd. It set off the same feelings that had kept him safe in dangerous situations. From the corner of his eye, he saw the difference between her fascinated eyes and her stiff body, and how she seemed to think carefully before every small movement. Their eyes met for a split second as he marched past. In that instant, Sergeant Marwood recognized something his army training had taught guards to look for: fear hidden behind obedience. It wasn't the normal fear a child might feel for a moment, but something deeper, something that had been there a long time. The man next to her, who looked sporty, wore an expensive watch, and had carefully trimmed stubble, tightened his grip when he saw her looking away. The girl immediately looked down, changing from interested to almost invisible in just a few seconds. Sergeant Marwood carried on marching, his face showing nothing, but his mind, trained for combat, had noted what he saw and kept watching. As the ceremony continued, Sergeant Marwood kept up his perfect marching while keeping an eye on the girl and her stepfather. The difference between them became clearer as time passed. The man looked confident, almost arrogant, while the child moved carefully and deliberately. A family with 2 young boys, about Lily's age, moved through the crowd and stood next to Sam and Lily. The mother smiled warmly at Lily, her eyes crinkling kindly. "Is this your first time seeing the changing of the guard?" she asked Lily. Her Scottish accent was soft and friendly. My boys have been talking about it all week. Before Lily could answer, Sam shifted slightly, putting himself between her and the woman. We're trying to watch, if you don't mind, he said with a tight smile that didn't look genuine. Oh, of course. Sorry to bother you, the woman replied, quickly glancing at her husband. Lily looked down at the ground, but not before Sergeant Marwood saw the longing look she gave the other children. The boys were giggling and pointing excitedly at the guards' tall bearskin hats. Their parents were encouraging them. It was a big contrast to Lily, who had to stay silent. As Sergeant Marwood made a perfect turn, he could briefly see Sam and Lily again. The man had bent down and was whispering something in the girl's ear. Although his face looked pleasant to anyone watching, Lily's face had lost all its color. When Sam stood up straight, he casually adjusted Lily's collar. As he did, her sleeve moved up just enough to show clear bruises on her upper arm, the unmistakable shape of fingerprints left by an adult hand gripping too tightly. A middle-aged couple standing nearby saw it too. The woman put her hand to her mouth and whispered something to her husband, who frowned deeply at Sam. Lovely ceremony, isn't it? The husband said, deliberately talking to Sam while his wife smiled at Lily. Your daughter seems really fascinated by it all. Sam's jaw tightened noticeably. She's not really interested in this stuff, he replied sharply. We're just killing time before our tour. Oh, but she seems quite interested, the woman persisted kindly, bending slightly towards Lily. Are you enjoying the guards, sweetheart? Lily's eyes widened. She looked caught between hope and terror. She glanced up at Sam, whose smile had hardened into something dangerous that only she could recognize. She's shy, Sam said, pulling Lily against his side. It looked like a fatherly hug, but it was really a warning squeeze. And we don't talk to strangers, do we, Lily? No, Sam, she whispered. The formal way she used his name didn't go unnoticed by the couple. As the soldiers changed formation again, Sergeant Marwood's path brought him closer to where they were standing. He could see Lily watching his movements with an intensity unusual for a child her age. Something in her look reminded him of civilians he'd seen in war zones, people desperately looking for anyone who might help. Sam noticed her watching the guards and bent down again. Remember what happens if you make a scene, he whispered, his voice just loud enough for Sergeant Marwood to hear. Straight back home, and you know what that means? Lily's small body tensed up, and she nodded quickly, fear flashing across her face. The elderly couple exchanged worried glances. The woman clutched her husband's arm as they watched Sam's increasingly controlling behavior. When Sam turned away for a moment to check his phone, the husband, a retired teacher with 40 years of experience spotting troubled children, tried again. Pardon me, he said quietly to Lily, but I dropped my program. Would you be kind enough to hand it to me? He pointed to the ceremony program that had fallen suspiciously close to Lily's feet. Lily looked up at Sam, who was still distracted, then carefully bent down to pick up the paper. As she handed it to the man, their fingers touched briefly. Are you all right, dear? The woman whispered, her eyes kind but concerned. Lily's lips parted, words forming but never spoken, as Sam's attention snapped back to her. What did I just say about talking to strangers? Sam hissed, snatching the program and pushing it at the elderly man. Here's your paper. Now mind your own business. He grabbed Lily's arm roughly, pulling her away from the couple and closer to the parade barrier. The sudden movement made Lily's sleeve ride up again, showing a clear pattern of bruises in different stages of healing, some yellow and fading, others fresh and purple. We're just concerned, the elderly man began. About what? Sam interrupted, his voice sharp enough that nearby tourists turned to look. About a father spending the day with his daughter. Is that so unusual? Stepdaughter, Lily corrected automatically, her voice barely a whisper. The crowd shifting had brought them closer to where Sergeant Marwood stood at attention. Although his eyes stayed fixed ahead as required, his training allowed him to notice every detail of the worsening situation just feet away. "What did you say?" Sam's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, his fingers digging into Lily's shoulder. "Nothing." "Sorry, Sam," she replied quickly, shrinking into herself. The elderly woman took a step forward, her motherly instincts taking over. "Young man, that child is clearly—" "Mind your own family, and I'll mind mine." Sam cut her off, his charm completely gone. "Come on, Lily, we're finding a better spot." He pulled Lily roughly through the crowd, putting them even closer to the marching route and directly in Sergeant Marwood's line of sight. As they pushed forward, Lily stumbled slightly. Sam yanked her upright with unnecessary force, making several onlookers frown. "Do that again, and we're going straight home," he threatened under his breath. "No stops, no exceptions. Understand?" Lily nodded silently, but something in her face had changed. Fear was turning into desperation. Her eyes locked onto Sergeant Marwood's with surprising intensity. Sergeant Marwood kept his ceremonial pose, but behind his practiced, calm expression, his mind was racing. 8 years in the regiment had taught him to recognize the signs of someone reaching their breaking point. The girl's body language had changed from defensive to something more urgent, the look of someone making a final decision. The elderly couple had followed, keeping their distance but not willing to leave the situation. They weren't the only ones watching now. A young mother nearby had noticed what was happening and was discreetly pointing her phone towards Sam. A tall man in a university sweatshirt had moved closer, looking ready to step in if needed. Sam sensed the growing attention and leaned down to Lily. His expression looked pleasant, but his whispered words were anything but. "Everyone's watching because of you. When we get home, you'll wish you'd never been born. One more mistake and—" He stopped suddenly, noticing how intently Lily was watching the guards. His fingers tightened around her wrist, hard enough that tears welled up in her eyes. "Stop looking at them," he ordered. "They can't help you. Nobody can." The ceremonial drums echoed across the palace grounds as the changing of the guard reached its main part. Tourists raised their phones higher, trying to get the perfect picture of British tradition, but Sergeant Marwood's focus had narrowed to the small girl standing just 10 feet away from him. Lily Davis stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Sergeant Marwood's face. There was something in her look that broke through the formal distance, a silent plea that spoke directly to the soldier inside the uniform. As Sam was briefly distracted by someone bumping into him, Lily took her chance. With careful, practiced movements that no 7-year-old should have had to learn, Lily raised her small hand to her face. To anyone just glancing, it might have looked like she was waving or pushing hair from her eyes. But to Sergeant Marwood, who had the same compulsory training as all soldiers working with the public, the gesture was clear. Her little fist opened and closed, then pressed against her palm. It was the universal children's distress signal, taught in schools and child protection programs across the country. It meant, "Help me, I'm in danger." Sergeant Marwood's combat-trained mind registered the signal instantly. He put it together with the bruises, the controlled fear, and the stepfather's threatening behavior. It all painted a clear picture of a child in immediate danger. Sam saw the movement just as Lily finished it. His face darkened as he realized what she'd done. "What was that?" he demanded, grabbing her wrist in midair. "What did you just do?" "Nothing," Lily whispered, real terror now replacing the practiced fear she'd shown earlier. "I was just—" "You signaled him, didn't you?" Sam's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper as his fingers dug into her arm. "You little liar! We're leaving, now!" He started pulling her backward through the crowd, his grip clearly painful. Lily stumbled as she was dragged away, her eyes still locked on Sergeant Marwood in a final, desperate plea. For 8 years, Sergeant Theo Marwood had stood guard with perfect, unwavering discipline. Through rain and snow, through tourist jokes and provocations, through physical discomfort and tiredness, he had kept the ceremonial stillness that defined the Queen's Guard. Now, in the time it takes for a heart to beat once, Sergeant Marwood made a decision that would change both his life and Lily's forever. The crowd gasped loudly as Sergeant Marwood broke away from the marching line. The sound of his boots hitting the stone path echoed in the sudden silence. Tourists lowered their cameras, confused. His movements were precise and purposeful. He wasn't just breaking the rules casually. He was a soldier responding to a threat with tactical skill. "What's happening?" Someone in the crowd whispered loudly. "Is this part of the show?" The other guards stayed in their positions. Years of training stopped them from reacting to this completely unexpected break in protocol, although their eyes followed Sergeant Marwood's movement, professionally assessing the situation. Sam froze mid-step, still holding Lily tightly, as he realized the guard was walking directly towards them with clear intent. The crowd naturally moved aside, creating a clear path between Sergeant Marwood and his target. "Time to go," Sam muttered, yanking Lily's arm hard enough that she cried out. But it was too late. The ceremonial guard, who tourists often thought of as just decoration, was showing his true nature, a highly trained soldier moving with the focused intensity of someone who had handled far more dangerous situations than this. In that moment, as Sergeant Marwood closed the distance between them with measured steps, Sam Davis realized his huge mistake. He had dismissed the guard as just a man in a costume, forgetting that underneath the ceremonial uniform was a soldier who had promised to protect, and who had just received a signal he could not and would not ignore. "Sir." Sergeant Marwood's voice carried the weight of military authority, cutting through the murmurs of the confused crowd. "I need you to release the child." Sam's expression quickly changed from shock to outrage, then to calculation. His grip on Lily loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. "This is my daughter," he said, forcing a confused laugh. "We're just leaving to catch our tour bus." Sergeant Marwood's posture remained parade ground perfect, but there was nothing ceremonial about his presence now. "Sir, I observed the distress signal. Protocol requires me to ensure the child's safety." His eyes flicked briefly to Lily. "Young lady, are you all right?" Before Lily could answer, Sam cut in. "This is ridiculous. She was just waving, playing around. Tell him, Lily." Lily looked down at the ground. Years of being conditioned fought against the hope of being rescued. When she looked up again, her gaze moved between Sam's warning glare and Sergeant Marwood's steady presence. She began, her voice barely audible. "She's fine," Sam insisted, pulling Lily closer to his side. It looked like a protective gesture, but it was clearly restraint. "This is completely inappropriate. You're supposed to be standing guard, not harassing tourists." 2 palace security officers had noticed the disturbance and were moving towards them, speaking quietly into their radios. The crowd had formed a loose circle around the scene, many recording with their phones despite the uncomfortable tension. "My primary duty is to protect," Sergeant Marwood stated with calm precision, speaking not just to Sam, but to the gathering crowd. The young lady used a recognized distress signal taught to children for emergencies. He turned his attention fully to Lily, softening his tone slightly. "Did someone teach you that signal in school?" Lily nodded, almost invisibly. Hope started to replace the fear in her eyes. "She was waving, for God's sake," Sam insisted, his charm returning as he addressed the crowd. "This is absurd. My daughter and I are here on holiday, and suddenly we're being treated like criminals." "Just a few questions, sir, to clear things up," Sergeant Marwood replied, his tone professional but firm. He subtly positioned himself, blocking any easy escape route. Perhaps the young lady would be more comfortable speaking with one of our female officers? A woman in a police uniform was approaching from the palace security office, called by the radio message. Sam's calm act began to crack. "We don't have time for this. Our tour leaves in 15 minutes. He tugged Lily towards the edge of the crowd. "Come on, we're going." "Sir," Sergeant Marwood's voice hardened slightly, "I need you to stop right there." "You have no right to detain us!" Sam hissed, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "You're a ceremonial guard, not police!" "Active duty military, sir," Sergeant Marwood corrected him, still perfectly composed, "and the safety of a child comes before all other protocols." The female police officer had reached them now. She crouched down to Lily's level. "Hello there," she said gently. "I'm Officer Wilson. What's your name?" Sam interrupted before Lily could answer. "This is ridiculous. We're leaving." He pulled Lily roughly towards him. "Tell these people you're fine so we can go, Lily." Lily looked at Officer Wilson, then at Sergeant Marwood, whose unwavering presence seemed to give her courage. Something shifted in her expression. A decision was made. "He hurts me," she whispered, the words tumbling out quickly before fear could silence her again. "All the time. Please don't let him take me home." Sam's face twisted with rage. "You lying little—" He lunged forward, grabbing for Lily's arm. Sergeant Marwood moved with the swift precision of battlefield training, stepping between them. "Sir, I need you to step back." "Get out of my way," Sam snarled, reaching for Lily around Sergeant Marwood's imposing figure. "She's coming with me." "No, sir," Sergeant Marwood replied with quiet finality. "She is not—" Sam's hand shot out, grabbing Sergeant Marwood's shoulder in what would turn out to be a terrible mistake. "I said get out of my way, toy soldier." What happened next was so quick that many in the crowd would later disagree about the exact order of events. Sergeant Marwood's response was a perfect military restraint technique, efficient, controlled, and done with surgical precision. In one smooth movement, Sergeant Marwood pivoted, breaking Sam's grip while at the same time securing his wrist in a joint lock that instantly brought the larger man to his knees. Sam's expression changed from rage to shock as he found himself held fast by a grip that used just enough pressure to control without causing injury. "Palace security, sir! Don't move!" The two security officers had reached them quickly, taking control of the situation. One moved to secure Sam, while the other created space between the growing crowd and Lily. "He's hurting me," Sam protested, his face twisted with fake pain. "This guard attacked me for no reason." "Actually, he didn't," called out the elderly man who had tried to help earlier. He stepped forward from the crowd, his wife beside him. "We've been watching this man's behavior towards the child for the past 30 minutes. She's clearly terrified of him. And I have it all on video," added the young mother who had been filming discreetly. "The bruises, the threatening behavior, everything." Officer Wilson had gently guided Lily a few steps away, keeping herself between the child and Sam. "Can you show me your arms, sweetheart?" she asked quietly. Lily hesitated, then slowly pushed up her sleeves. She revealed what the officer's experienced eyes immediately recognized as systematic abuse. Bruises at various stages of healing, some shaped distinctly like fingerprints. "Those could be from anything," Sam protested, struggling against the security officer's grip. "Kids fall all the time. Lily, tell them how clumsy you are." Lily flinched at his raised voice but stayed silent, her eyes fixed on Sergeant Marwood, who had returned to his professional stance, although he remained close enough to step in if needed. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," the security officer informed Sam, securing his hands behind his back. "There are serious questions that need answering." "This is outrageous!" Sam's voice rose as he was pulled to his feet. "You can't do this. She's my stepdaughter. I have rights." "And she has the right to safety," Officer Wilson replied firmly, her hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. The evidence suggests that right has been violated. The second security officer spoke quietly into his radio, calling for more police support. The crowd had grown larger now, tourists whispering and pointing as the scene unfolded. "You'll regret this." Sam spat as he was led away, twisting to glare at Lily. "When they realize you're lying, you'll come home and then—" "That's enough," the officer holding him interrupted, tightening his grip slightly. "One more threat, and I'll add intimidation of a witness to the charges." As Sam was escorted towards the security office, his angry protests fading away, Lily remained frozen in place. Her small body trembled from the terror she'd felt and the unfamiliar feeling of hope. The female officer knelt beside her, speaking gently. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore." "He always finds a way," Lily whispered. Years of conditioning showed in her certainty. "He said no one would believe me, that they'd send me back to him because no one else wants me." Sergeant Marwood, who had kept a respectful distance while security handled the situation, now made a decision just as important as breaking formation had been moments earlier. He stepped forward and knelt down to Lily's level. His tall ceremonial bearskin hat made the movement a bit awkward, but his eyes were completely serious. "I believed you," he said simply, "and I always will." The words, spoken with absolute certainty, seemed to break through the layers of fear that had built up around Lily's heart. For the first time since she'd arrived at the palace, her shoulders relaxed slightly, and her eyes held something other than terror, the first fragile spark of trust. Officer Wilson wrapped a blanket around Lily's shoulders after the palace medical team documented her injuries. The elderly couple and other witnesses had given their contact details. Sergeant Marwood, relieved from ceremonial duty, sat outside the palace medical office. He'd taken off his bearskin hat, showing his short, dark hair. "Sergeant Marwood," Officer Wilson approached. "Lily's asking for you." Inside, Lily sat with a cup of hot chocolate, her injuries treated. When Sergeant Marwood entered, her face brightened. "You came back," she said, surprised. "I said I would," Sergeant Marwood replied, taking the chair beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Better." She studied him curiously. "You look different without your big hat." A small smile crossed Sergeant Marwood's face. "Most people say that." "Lily's been telling us about her situation," Officer Wilson said quietly. "Her mother passed away 14 months ago, and her stepfather got custody as the only legal guardian. He was nice at first," Lily said, gripping her mug. "But then he changed. He said it was my fault, that I was bad." "None of this was your fault," Sergeant Marwood said firmly. "You were very brave today." "What happens now?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Where will I go?" "Child Services will arrange emergency foster care while the case is processed," Officer Wilson explained. "Foster care?" Fear returned to Lily's face. "Sam said foster homes are horrible places where nobody loves you." "That's not true," Officer Wilson assured her. "Foster parents are carefully checked." "And what if—" Sergeant Marwood interrupted, pausing briefly. "What if there was another option?" Both looked at him, questioning. "I'm certified as an emergency foster parent through the regiment's family support program," Sergeant Marwood explained. "It's part of our service to military families in crisis." He turned to Lily. "I can't promise it would be perfect. I've never been a father before, but I can promise you would be safe and never hurt again." "Are you suggesting temporary placement?" Officer Wilson asked. "Initially, yes," Sergeant Marwood confirmed, his eyes on Lily. "But I'd like to begin the adoption process as soon as possible, if Lily would be comfortable with that." The word adoption hung in the air. Lily's eyes widened, disbelief and hope fighting on her face. "You want to adopt me?" she whispered. "But you don't even know me." "I know you're brave enough to signal for help when needed," Sergeant Marwood replied. "I know you've survived things no child should experience, and sometimes people recognize the family they're meant to have the moment they meet. I've served in many roles, Lily, but being your father might be the most important duty I'll ever accept, if you'll have me." Officer Wilson excused herself to handle paperwork, leaving them alone with this possibility. "You won't get tired of me? Or change your mind?" Lily asked, years of rejection clear in her voice. "In the regiment, we make promises we don't break," Sergeant Marwood said. "I won't change my mind." For the first time, a real smile transformed Lily's face. Not the careful, practiced expression she'd worn earlier, but something genuine that reached her eyes. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." Sergeant Marwood nodded, emotion briefly tightening his throat. "Then I'll start the paperwork today." Officer Wilson returned with the forms, and Sergeant Marwood filled them out with military precision. His signature represented not just a legal commitment, but a promise to the small girl watching with growing trust. 3 hours later, Sergeant Marwood walked through the palace gates with Lily by his side. His ceremonial uniform had been replaced by civilian clothes, but his military posture remained unmistakable. "Ready to go home?" he asked, offering his hand. Lily slipped her small hand into his. "Home," she repeated, testing the word and finding it finally held no fear. "Yes, I'm ready." What would you have done if you saw signs of abuse like those Sergeant Marwood noticed? How many of us would have the courage to step outside our expected roles when a child's safety is involved? The signals children use to ask for help are often subtle, a gesture, a look, or behavior that doesn't quite fit. Learning to recognize these signs could make you someone's hero.